Without the general trust that people have in each other, society itself would disintegrate, for very few relationships are based entirely upon what is known with certainty about another person, and very few relationships would endure if trust were not as strong as, or stronger than, rational proof or personal observation. In the same way, money transactions would collapse without trust. There are nuances of this trust. The assertion that money is always credit because its value rests upon the recipient's confidence that he will be able to acquire a certain quantity of goods in exchange for it is not entirely adequate. For it is not only a money economy, but any economy, that depends upon such trust. If the farmer did not have confidence that his field would bear grain this year as in former years, he would not sow. If the trader did not believe that the public would desire his goods, he would not provide them, etc. This kind of trust is only a weak form of inductive knowledge. But in the case of credit, of trust in someone, there is an additional element which is hard to describe. It is most clearly embodied in religious faith. When someone says that he believes in God, this does not merely express an imperfect stage of knowledge about God, but a state of mind which has nothing to do with knowledge, which is both less and more than knowledge. To believe in someone, without adding or even conceiving what it is that one believes about him, is to employ a very subtle and profound idiom. It expresses the feeling that there exists between our idea of a being and the being itself a definite connection and unity, a certain consistency in our conception of it, an assurance and lack of resistance in the surrender of the ego to this conception, which may rest upon particular reasons, but is not explained by them. Economic credit does contain an element of this supertheoretical belief, and so does the confidence that the community will assure the validity of the tokens for which we have exchanged the products of our labor in an exchange against material goods. This is largely, as I have said, a simple induction, but it contains a further element of social psychological quasi-religious faith. The feeling of personal security that the possession of money gives is perhaps the most concentrated and pointed form and manifestation of confidence in the socio-political organization and order. The subjectivity of this process is, so to speak, a higher power of the subjectivity that creates the value of precious metals in the first place. The latter is presupposed, but now it has a practical outcome in money transactions through that two-sided faith. This also illustrates that the development from material money to credit money is less radical than appears at first, because credit money has to be interpreted as the evolution, growing independence and isolation of those elements of credit which already exist in fact in material money. The nature of the economic circle and its significance for money, the guarantee for the continuous usefulness of money, which is the essence of the relation of the contracting parties to the whole social group, has, however, a peculiar form. From an abstract point of view, this guarantee does not exist because the owner of money cannot force anybody to give him something for money, even for money that is indisputably good. This becomes evident in cases of boycott. Only where obligations already exist can the creditor be forced to accept money in settlement of the obligation, and even that is not the case in all legal systems. The possibility that the claim that money represents will not be satisfied confirms the character of money as mere credit, for it is the essence of credit that the probability of realizing it is never 100%. No matter how closely it may approach it. The individual is free, in fact, to transfer his product or other possessions to the owner of money or to retain them, whereas the community is duty-bound to him. This distribution of freedom and bondage, although paradoxical, frequently serves as a category of knowledge. Thus, the advocates of statistical laws have asserted that society, in given conditions, must produce a definite number of murders, thefts, and illegitimate births, but that the individual is not thereby constrained to such behavior and remains free to act morally or immorally. The statistical law does not determine that a particular individual must commit such acts, but only that the social whole to which he belongs must produce a determinate number. Or we may be told that society or the species as a whole have a determinate role in the divine scheme of the universe, in the evolution of being towards its final transcendental purposes, but that the individual representatives of these purposes are irrelevant, are free to distribute the execution among themselves, and that any particular individual may opt out without impairing the total performance. Finally, it has been asserted that the actions of a group are always strictly determined in the manner of a natural law by the direction of their interests, as material masses are determined by gravitation, but that the individual may be misled by theories and conflicts, that he confronts numerous alternatives among which he may choose rightly or wrongly, in contrast with the actions of the collective entity which have no freedom because they are guided by deviating instincts and purposes. We do not have to investigate here whether these ideas are true or false. I want only to indicate that the model of a relationship between the collective entity and the individual is accepted in many different contexts. The former is conceived as being ruled by necessity, the latter is free, the restraint of the former is moderated by the freedom of the latter, and this freedom itself is limited by the collective restraint and adapted to the necessity of the total result. The guarantee of the general usefulness of money, which the ruler or other representative of the community undertakes by the coinage of metal or the printing of paper, is an acceptance of the overwhelming probability that every individual, in spite of his liberty to refuse the money, will accept it. These circumstances lead to the conclusion that the currency must be of a higher value the larger the group for which it is supposed to be valid. Within a small local group, money of inferior value may circulate. This happens in the most primitive culture. In Darfur, local means of exchange, hoes, tobacco, balls of cotton, etc., circulated within each district. The better currency, cloth, cows, slaves, was valid for all of them. It may even happen that the paper money issued by a state is restricted to a single province. Turkey issued notes in 1853 that were supposed to be valid only in Constantinople. Very small and closely allied associations occasionally come to an agreement to accept any symbol, even a counter, as money. The spread of trade relations, however, requires a valuable currency, if only because the transportation of money over long distances makes it desirable that the value should be concentrated in a small volume. Thus, the historical empires and the trading states with extensive markets were always driven towards money with a high material value. Some contrary trends prove the same rule. The essential advantage of medieval rights of coinage consisted in the fact that the sovereign was allowed to coin new pennies in his domain at any time and to enforce the exchange of all old coins, or foreign coins, that entered the area as a result of trade, against the new ones. With each debasement of his coins he profited by the difference between the new and the exchanged coin. But this advantage depended upon a large domain, for in small areas the privilege of coinage did not pay because the market for the coins was too small. If the profit from debasement of the coinage had not been contingent upon the size of the area, the chaos of coins in Germany would have been much worse, because of the terrible frivolity with which the privilege of coinage was granted to every monastery and every small town. Just because the socio-economic structure of a domain required stable money, the profit to be had from an enforced inferior money was considerable.